Have you ever noticed how, when people study Bible prophecy, the books of Daniel and Revelation always seem to be talked about in the same breath? It's a classic pairing. But have you ever stopped to ask why? Is it just a tradition? Or is there a much deeper, deliberate connection woven right into the texts themselves? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the ancient roots of this connection. Then, we'll see how Daniel literally sets the stage in the New Testament. From there, we'll jump into how Revelation just runs with that blueprint. And then we'll get to the big question: why is it so important to study them together? And finally, we'll see the single amazing story they tell.
So let's get right to it. This whole idea of linking Daniel and Revelation, it's not some new thing, not at all. It's a practice that goes back centuries. We're going to start by exploring where this powerful idea even came from and why it's stuck around for so long.
And this, right here, is the absolute heart of the matter. Is this whole thing just a habit? Something readers came up with because it seemed to fit? Or was there an intentional, God-inspired bridge being built between these two books across hundreds of years? Honestly, the answer to that question changes everything about how we read them.
And check this out. This is not a modern theory. This quote from over 100 years ago shows that people have been making this argument for a long, long time. The idea here isn't just that the books complement each other. It's that Revelation actually shines a spotlight back on Daniel, lighting up its prophecies and making the whole picture so much clearer.
So where do we find the first real piece of evidence for this intentional link? You might be surprised. It's not in some dusty old commentary. The trail actually begins right there in the New Testament. And the first clue comes from Jesus himself.
Look at this, it's incredible. On the left, you've got this famous prophecy from Daniel about a striking stone representing God's kingdom that's going to come and smash all the kingdoms of the earth. And then on the right, you have Jesus taking that exact imagery and saying, "Yup, that stone, that's me." This is not a casual reference. This is a massive, direct claim that he is the fulfillment of that prophecy.
So what's the big takeaway here? It means the link between Daniel and the New Testament wasn't invented by theologians centuries later. It was established by the central figure of the entire story. Jesus and the gospel writers saw Daniel's words as living, active prophecy that was literally coming true right in front of their eyes. And this wasn't just a one-off thing, not by a long shot. The language of Daniel is woven all through the Gospels. That striking stone becomes the cornerstone. The title Jesus used for himself more than any other, Son of Man, comes straight from a vision in Daniel 7. And that famous, chilling warning about the abomination of desolation, he's quoting Daniel directly. There is a clear and deliberate pattern here.
Okay, so the Gospels give us the first major clues, but it's when we get to the book of Revelation that this connection just explodes. It becomes the literal backbone of the entire book. Let's see how Revelation takes Daniel's blueprint and builds something massive on top of it.
Now, get this. Just let this sink in for a second. More than half, more than 50% of all the Old Testament references in the entire book of Revelation are pulled directly from the prophecies of Daniel. That's a staggering statistic. This isn't just a subtle hint, it's a huge flashing neon sign that says, to understand me, you have to start with Daniel.
And here's why that number is so crucial. Daniel isn't just quoted in Revelation, it provides the entire symbolic language. You can think of it like this. Trying to understand the beasts, the thrones, and the timelines in Revelation without Daniel is like trying to read a book in a language you don't speak. You'll see the words, but they won't mean anything. Daniel is the dictionary.
Let's look at it side by side. It's so clear. On the left, core ideas from Daniel. On the right, how Revelation picks them up. Daniel's 4 separate beasts from the sea, they get mashed up into Revelation's single, terrifying sea beast. The persecution from the little horn power? Revelation continues that story with the war against the saints. The great white throne judgment scene, the Son of Man returning on the clouds. It's all there. Revelation is, without a doubt, the sequel. Okay. So the evidence is overwhelming, the connection is rock solid. But that brings us to the most important question of all. So what? Why does this matter? Why was this connection designed this way? And what's the big takeaway for us today?
When you really boil it all down, there are 3 powerful interlocking reasons why these books belong together. They share a deep ethical quality, they have overlapping timelines, and they share an unwavering singular focus on Jesus Christ.
So first up, this ethical quality. At their heart, both Daniel and Revelation are telling the story of a great spiritual war. And they put a choice right in front of the reader, plain and simple. Who will you worship, the creator God, or the temporary, deceptive powers of this world? It's a fundamental question that gives us a moral compass, and it's just as relevant now as it was thousands of years ago. Second, the chronology. You see, these aren't two separate timelines. It's one single, continuous prophetic map. Daniel lays out the roadmap, starting way back in ancient Babylon and stretching all the way to the end of time. Then Jesus shows up in the Gospels and says, "Okay, everyone, it's starting." And finally, Revelation comes along and zooms in, giving us the high-definition details of the final events. It's one seamless story.
And finally, we have the most critical point of all. This whole epic story spanning both books is ultimately about one person. From Daniel's vision of the Son of Man receiving his eternal kingdom, all the way to Revelation's climax of the King of Kings returning in glory, the entire narrative points to Jesus Christ. He is the hero. He is the focus.
All right, let's bring it all home. We've looked at the history, we've seen it in the Gospels, we've seen it all over Revelation. So what's the final verdict on this ancient connection?
When you put all the pieces together, the conclusion is impossible to ignore. This is not a coincidence. This isn't just a convenient tradition. The evidence is overwhelming. This is a deliberate, inspired design. Revelation was written to be the continuation, the grand finale of the story that Daniel started all those centuries ago.
So here's the bottom line. You have two books written hundreds of years apart, yet they tell one single, unified story about one single person. They are two halves of a whole. Trying to read one without the other is like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Daniel unlocks Revelation, and Revelation completes Daniel.
And that leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. If it's true, if Daniel and Revelation really do tell one continuous story of history, from Babylon all the way to the end, then it forces us to ask a pretty profound question. Where do we fit into that story today? And what part are we being called to play?